we're going to be talking about CloudFormation StackSets. And exciting portion of this one is we've got Jonathan from Capital One, who's also going to talk about his experience of his team using CloudFormation StackSets. So let's have him on.
Jonathan, you with us?
All right.
Looks like
hello.
There you go. Good to have you.
Thank you for having me. We're excited to be here.
Awesome. So let's do some intros. Yeah, Robbie, you want to say hi?
Hey, hey Anya and Jillian. Thanks for having me here. I'm Ravi Vishwanathan. I'm a software development manager for CloudFormation StackSets. I've been with Amazon for a little over 7 years now, and still feeling like it's day one. Yeah, that's about it.
Cool. And Jonathan, do you want to just give a quick intro of yourself?
Yeah, certainly. I'm Jonathan Bernal. I'm a senior lead software engineer at Capital One, working with the cloud productivity engineering, section. And yeah, I've built a product that is going to be using StackSets to be deploying to all of our Capital One accounts.
Awesome.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, there was a couple things going on there. We said StackSets, we said CloudFormation, Stack. So maybe Ravi, if you could just kind of break down first what is CloudFormation.
Yeah, I could talk about what is IAC and what is CloudFormation and what is StackSets, how it all fits together. So infrastructure as code, or IAC, like cool folks call it, is a concept of provisioning and doing change management and lifecycle management of infrastructure through code instead of a traditional, manual process, which is hard to scale with all the cloud computing. So with IAC, we write config files or code files which contains a blueprint or a desired state of your infrastructure, and this makes it easier to edit, distribute, reproduce, or replicate the infrastructure in a consistent way. So and these files can be organized into more logical and manageable units. However you want to structure your infrastructure, and this enables really the best practice of DevOps and enables CI/CD. So generally, IAC is implemented either in one of the two forms. It's either declarative or imperative. So declarative is the style in which you specify what your infrastructure should look like, versus imperative, in which it's about like how infrastructure will get to the final state. Generally, you see more of a declarative style. And AWS, we have two key offerings for IAC. One is AWS CloudFormation and CDK. CloudFormation is a declarative style of IAC, and CDK is an imperative style in which lets you do programming language constructs, and which actually decomposes into CFN templates, which I'll get into. So what is CloudFormation? So CloudFormation is a infrastructure as a code tool that helps customers model, provision, and manage their cloud applications and infrastructure in a safe, predictable, and repeatable way. It's highly scalable and reliable, and it helps managing drifts and entropy of the state of the infrastructure and give the ability to make control changes to the infrastructure, right? And the core part of CloudFormation, two core concepts are CFN templates or CloudFormation templates. So CloudFormation templates are nothing but a declarative style config files. It's written in YAML or JSON notation that represents a desired state of a system. So the CFN template will have a definition of what AWS services and what configurations should be provisioned. And this AWS services entity are called as CFN resources. So CFN takes this template as an input and provision these resources for the customers, right? And this provision unit is what we call a stack. The stack is nothing but a logical grouping of resources that's provisioned in a region and account, and it can represent an entire application or part of an application. So an application can have like many number of stacks. So this is what we call stacks in the context of CloudFormation. It's nothing but a provision group of resources. Now, what if you want to replicate the stack into multiple accounts and multiple regions? A lot of the big enterprises have multiple data centers, and even within a small startups, there could be like beta, prod, test, different environments, right? So this is where StackSets comes in. So StackSets is a logical entity or grouping of stacks with the account and region combination. So a StackSets takes the same CFN template as an input. In addition, it takes a list of accounts and list of regions that you want the stack to be provisioned, and then it just does it in a single operation, and it manages this whole cross-account, cross-region provisioning for you, so that the customers doesn't have to manage it themselves. Take the template and replicate it. So um, this is how the CFN resources, stacks, and stack sets are kind of kind of getting grouped into a higher logical entity. Internally, StackSets has been implemented as a wrapper on top of core CloudFormation engine, and it extends the functionality for cross-account, cross-region. Today, our StackSets is there in two different modes. One is a self managed mode, and then service managed mode. In self managed mode, customers manage the permissions themselves. In a service managed mode, we manage the permission model through integration with AWS organizations. So yeah, and we have a lot of enterprise customers using StackSets today for different use cases. And I'm actually excited today to introduce a special guest, Jonathan. He's one of our customer. He's a senior client, senior lead software engineer with Capital One, and he's here to talk about how StackSets is helping to solve Capital One's problem and some of the use cases. So, Jonathan, how did you determine StackSets is the best tool for your use case, and can you walk us through the journey? Yeah.
Yes, thank you. So at Capital One, we actually have a fairly robust CI/CD systems, processes, and tools as well, which is constantly being used by all of our development teams. And in fact, we're not really strangers to infrastructure as code or anything like that. However, the product that I'm currently working in is going to be a new internal platform, and this is something that is going to require that we deploy our services to every single or every Capital One account that we have at the moment, including the active regions where we use our infrastructure. And so, in order to accomplish that, we first looked at what we had internally, right, to see if we had any particular patterns that we were using, or any other platform teams that might already be doing this. But what we found was that we didn't really have a consistent pattern for this, right? So our first thought was like, let's just go ahead and build something, like everybody else has done, and we could just accomplish it. But as we started gathering our requirements of what we were going to need to do to get our service to every account, we started realizing that it's going to be a lot of work. So when we started evaluating, any possibilities of what could be already out there, one of them was StackSets. And when we started evaluating, what features it provided, and everything like that, we determined that StackSets is really going to accomplish what we needed and then some. So that's why we decided to move forward with it.
Yeah, and maybe if you can tell us more about like specifically the problem you were trying to solve, and dive into a little more about like some of those requirements that you were looking for that helped you eventually decide to go with CloudFormation StackSets.
Certainly. So the requirements that we wanted to have or that we wanted to meet were that we could have robust and resilient deployments, right, with an automatic failback, so that if something goes wrong after while we're deploying it, we're not really necessarily risking everything that's currently out there, and be able to revert back to the previous version that we had. We also wanted to be able to orchestrate like the speed by which all of the infrastructure is being deployed. So we don't want to, with so many accounts, we don't necessarily want to do it sequentially, just because it would take quite a long time. And StackSets allows us to configure not just concurrency, but also whether we want to do parallel deployments per region. So that was something that really intrigued us. The other one was having a way by which we could track everything that is currently deployed out there. And that was the other thing that is out of the box, is just StackSets provides you all of that information from the console. And lastly, was for us to be able to have a way to check whether there was any configuration drift on any of the stacks that we already have deployed.
Yeah, thanks, Jonathan. So I actually have a question on how did you implement any sort of like standardization or best practices around this? Because there's a lot of moving parts here as you're talking about, different environments, different applications. Can you tell us a little bit more about how you did that?
Yes, of course. We are actually are still developing some of those best practices that we're going to be following. Like I mentioned, we're actually the first team at Capital One that's going to be leveraging StackSets. We have teams who leverage CloudFormation by itself, but not StackSets in the past. So the first thing that we wanted to do was be able to determine how to secure it, right? So that we can make sure that nobody can use it who's not supposed to, for example. And one of the ways that we were able to accomplish that was by identifying the minimum permissions that IAM permissions that are required for StackSets to work. Because if you look at the current documentation that is available, it asks for very broad permissions. So we kind of had to work through that process, and this is actually how Ravi and I started working together, because we communicated with the StackSets team and tried to determine, hey, do you already have this, right? So that we don't have to go through the process of figuring it all out by ourselves. And they were able to help us out and provided us with a lot more restricted permissions, which we were able to take and actually further lock them down as well.
Cool, thank you.
Yeah, and like, what were some of the challenges, I guess, you were going through this process of onboarding onto StackSets, and if there's anything you're thinking about now that you would maybe do differently, give some advice to people here maybe are thinking about using StackSets?
Sure. So I don't know that we necessarily had a lot of challenges adopting the use of StackSets, at least not as far as the technology goes. But we are a bank, so it does have a little bit more of, I guess, what could be considered red tape to be able to get through security and auditing and everything like that. So for the most part, that was where our challenges were found. If I could do it all over again, I don't think that we would necessarily follow a different process that we followed this time, just because it was, I mean, honestly, like I mentioned, from the technology perspective, like StackSets was very simple to use. It was just a matter of determining how to use it properly. As far as any challenges that we were able to face, or that we did face, were more related to what's the word, like features that maybe were not readily available yet, that were available with CloudFormation stacks, which we kind of had to work around them for some of them, and some of them which was more about coming out with more creative ways to be able to accomplish it. One particular example that I could give is how to be able to get resources on the target account at the time of the execution of the stack or the StackSet operation, right? Because CloudFormation does not provide you a way to do lookups. So we actually had to use a custom resource to be able to do that, and just kind of circumvent that limitation that is there at the moment.
Yeah. So, Jonathan, seems like you've been using StackSets for a while now, right? So, what are the top 3 feedbacks that you want to give back to StackSets team that we can take it away and address in your opinion?
So as far as feedback goes, like I mentioned, I don't think that we really ran into very difficult problems or anything like that with it. So I think my only feedback is, and I get, given that the AWS documentation in a lot of ways is kind of open source, so it's kind of feedback for everybody. So we got to try to update the documentation to provide more details of how to, like I mentioned, not just how to use it, but how to use it properly. Providing, especially I think a comparison between the features that are available for CloudFormation stacks but not available whenever you're using CloudFormation StackSets, that would be very, very useful. But other than that, I think it's a very solid service, at least so far anyways.
That's great to hear. Cool. So are you, just a quick question, I was wondering if you have, if other organizations within your enterprise are kind of following the current patterns that you've established and kind of interested to bring on more applications into this? Like, are you seeing adoption?
So we're still in I guess, the initial stages of trying to create the internal documentation and automation for other teams to be able to adopt the use of StackSets easily. But we have received a lot of interest in the work that we're doing. So we're working on, like I mentioned, on creating that automation to allow other teams to be able to use it easily.
Awesome. That's great to hear. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you as well.
Yeah, thanks, Jonathan, and definitely great feedback.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I know it's we're in 2022 and we're still talking about infrastructure as code. There are probably some people maybe who are like been putting it off and they're just like, oh man, now you guys telling me I should do it. So do you have any advice to those people who are probably procrastinating on infrastructure as code?
Uh,
uh,
for me, the biggest advice that I would give it is kind of like, kind of like unit testing. Nobody really wants to do it when you're developing, but if you do it after the fact, it's a lot more difficult to go back and implement it. And once you do have it, you can really like get a lot of benefit out of it. So, for example, in infrastructure as code, once you have your infrastructure set up, it's so much easier to modify and change or redeploy or just tear it all down and recreate it. Versus if you're, provisioning things manually, then you have to somehow figure out what can and cannot be removed and what dependencies are. So infrastructure as code just really makes that so much simpler.
All right.
Robbie, what about you? Any
yeah,
advice?
yeah. Plus one to what Jonathan said, and I wouldn't do it any other way. Right? It is. Uh, it's kind of like super fundamental. It's like how you write a code and test it, and as part of the DevOps, we should be writing the infrastructure as a config or a code in this modern world.
Yeah, it's fundamental whenever you're working in the
Yeah,
cloud.
it's so elementary, and it used to be an optional when we are doing bare metal kind of servers, but then the moment AWS made cloud computing a thing, the problem, the earliest one of the earliest problem we realized is the scaling of infrastructure, managing it, maintaining it, and it becomes so fundamental since then, and in part of the DevOps community, and it enables not just that, it enables a lot of best practices and stuff. So um, yeah, I'd say don't do it any other way. This is the only way. If anybody's starting with cloud computing or even with the any sort of infrastructure setup, do it with an IAC.
Awesome. Well, this is really good to hear. Thank you so much, Jonathan and Ravi. We do actually have a really pertinent question over here from our audience. So maybe we can address that as we are talking. Have you had any issues migrating existing infrastructure to StackSets? Maybe we can address some of those points.
So for my particular use case, we're actually just deploying new infrastructure. So we haven't really had the opportunity to import things. So maybe Ravi can speak a little bit more on that.
Yeah, so I can speak in terms of some of the customers, right? Like, so StackSets has a feature called Stack Import. So there are two kind of migrations StackSets team supported. One is the customers who hasn't used CloudFormation yet and they want to be on to CloudFormation, and there are customers who are using CloudFormation because CloudFormation is actually a decade old at this point, but they're not as in StackSets because StackSets is a new feature. So for the second category, we launched a project feature called Stack Import. So if you are already using CloudFormation stacks, but hesitant to migrate to StackSets, I would say leverage the feature called Stack Import, in which you could list your stacks that you want to convert into StackSets, and we will import the stack into StackSets in a managed way. Um, And for the other category of customers who are not yet in CloudFormation, we always recommend, we evaluate the use case and start with StackSets, right? If you don't start, and then it's hard to go back and do the backfill. But that's pretty straightforward, migration in general. Uh,
And Rob, we've got people
yeah.
from all over the world who are starting different stages of which they're using AWS. Is there really a certain point in their business application maturity in which it makes sense to start using StackSets?
Yeah. So today, a lot of Stax's customers are big enterprises who deals with a lot of multi-region application. They're international, or sometimes they have a complex application and they want able to manage it better, right? But it's really it's not just for big enterprises; it's also for small startups. So anytime you foresee, you have to replicate your infrastructure to multiple accounts or multiple regions, be it a small web app, that's when you start with Staxes, right? Don't replicate it manually. Staxes is here for you, and we have exciting features planned to even more manage the dependencies between the stacks, right? So applications can be decomposed into smaller stacks, and some of the exciting roadmap that we have is how to kind of make the relationship and how to have some dependency management between stacks. So I would say when you are ready to provision your infrastructure and even in test environments, start with stacks and stack sets right there. And that's the probably the best way to start. Um, yeah.
Yeah, I like that. So multiple means even if it's just one account, because I mean, Anya and I both work with startups, so we know even starting with best practices as early as possible is just going to really
Right.
save you time later on.
Right. I mean, at the minimum, you need a test environment, maybe pre-prod or gamma environment, and prod. StackSets can help here, right? If you need to scale your application to multiple regions, StackSets can help here. So if you want to have application which has cross-region communication, StackSets can help here. So yeah, it's a full spectrum from startup to big enterprises. Some of the big enterprises also use us for not just provisioning, but for account baselining. They just vend uh, different accounts to different teams as they scale up, and they want to make sure account gets to a certain baseline stage, and they use taxes for that too. But yeah, but the minimum for infrastructure provisioning, start with that, and then um, you know once you start using it, I think you won't be able to go back to any other way, right? So just start with stack and stack sets as my recommendation when you're ready to provision anything. Yeah.
Cool. Thank you.
Yeah. So where should people maybe go to if they want to learn more about CloudFormation, stack sets? Maybe they might still want to get the vocabulary of stack sets, stacks, CloudFormation infrastructure as code.
Yeah, I'd start with the AWS documentation, and I definitely take the feedback from Jonathan about fixing some of the documentation. I take the feedback. Happy to work with you offline, Jonathan, to see what we can do. I'll start with the AWS documentations, and then it's a free tool. Just go to the console or use our CLI. Just try, just create one stack and then stack sets and play it around. That's where I would start, and read the documentation and just play around. It's easy to learn and fun to use.
Well, yeah. Thank you so much, Ravi, Jonathan, for being here today with us.
It's a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.